Shalom, my brothers and sisters. This is Peter Michael Martinez. I want to thank you for joining us here at Remnant House, the home of the strong and the very courageous. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Antichrist, the high priest, the calendar, and the holy oil. And my beloved brothers and sisters, I'm coming to you on the 12th day of the first month in accordance with the holy Zadok calendar of the holy priests of Israel. Before the desecration, of course, of our beloved Jerusalem. And today I'm going to be taking the time to answer some questions that some of you have had, and especially concerning the holy calendar of the kingdom of Yahuwah and the imposters, if you will. And in order to help you understand the gravity of this matter, we have to travel a bit in time to the history of the people of Israel that parallels the time we're in today. And we're wise to look at the prophecies of Daniel as he prophesied things that pertain to the Antichrist. Amen. And I know many people are paying much closer attention nowadays to the subject of the mark of the beast and the Antichrist. This has now become a hot topic, and I pray this broadcast helps you in your pursuit, in your study of the Holy Scriptures as you follow Messiah in these perilous days. Amen. And so we pick up Israel's history at the time of about 175 BCE, and it is a time of great prophetic importance for those living at that time and for us today as well. Antiochus Epiphanes is important in the world history, especially concerning Israel and the Bible, because he is a picture of one coming to the nation of Israel, a prototype of the Antichrist. Now, this is really not disputed even among Jewish scholars that this man was called the Wicked. So it is universally accepted that he literally represents the Antichrist. Antiochus Epiphanes came to the scene as a man of peace, actually, about 175 BC. He was recorded as being a phenomenal orator and a tremendous person of peace, and he had a lot of very flattering and very silver-tongued. He was a great public orator with great flatteries and made people acknowledge that he was their right king, not only in Syria, but also in Israel. So Syria, of course, was where he was ruling from, and of course then he also he was taking Israel as well. And again, this was the Greek dynasty that under Alexander the Great, as prophesied also by Daniel, would be broken up. And so this was one of the pieces that was broken up. And he was a great leader, okay? And in his estate, it says in the book of Daniel,
"And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably, and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant."
That in his estate shall stand up a vile person. And in the Old Testament, the prince of the covenant, right, refers to the high priest in Jerusalem, while in the New Testament, the prince of the covenant is Yahusha. Onias was the legitimate high priest, a Jewish high priest at this time, and Antiochus Epiphanes brutally threw him out and exalted an apostate. So he replaced the right priest with a false priest, a man named Menelaus. The Jews started, of course, becoming quite suspicious at that point that this guy wasn't quite who they thought he was. He took over the fat lands of Israel, Edom, Moab, all Palestine, up to Syria, as prophesied.
"He shall enter peaceably, even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil, and riches, yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time."
And then he came down to invade Egypt, and with a great army, and the old rivalry between Egypt and Syria was renewed, as was said,
"And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army, And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him.
And so Antiochus Epiphanes tricked some leaders of the south to turn against their king, and Ptolemy was betrayed as prophesied.
Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain.
And then Antiochus then came down to Egypt to sign a peace treaty. The two leaders, Antiochus and Ptolemy, lied in signing the treaty as prophesied. So this, of course, is all recorded history.
And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the appointed time.
And then Antiochus secretly devised the destruction of the Old Covenant, intending to replace the Old Covenant, or so replacing the ways that up to this point, remember this is BC, this is 175 BC, okay? So intended to replace the pagan, Hellenistic, hedonistic culture and religion as prophesied in the book of Daniel. So these are all prophecies that Daniel made.
His heart shall be against the covenant.
Incredibly powerful and accurate. And remember, this is a foreshadow, this is a type and shadow of the Antichrist. So some believe that this already fulfilled Daniel, but I believe that this was a type and shadow because, again, we see Mashiach refer to the abomination of desolation, which some believe was fulfilled here in this time. But of course, Mashiach revives that. So that tells you that some things do repeat more than once. And it tells us that the ships of Shittim were Roman Empire soldiers stationed in Cyprus. The Roman soldiers stopped Antiochus from attacking Egypt.
For the ships of Shittim shall come against him.
And in his anger and frustration, he turned back to Jerusalem, which, according to some reports, some historical accounts, he had heard that they believed that he had died. And so he returned with great anger.
Therefore he shall be grieved and return, and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return, and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant.
And Antiochus Epiphanes then brought in what many believe, and frankly is, an abomination that makes desolation. On arriving in Jerusalem, this is undeniable that this is absolutely horrible after slaughtering who knows how many. Some counts were up as high as 80,000 Israelites, Hebrews, were killed during this time as he brought in his troops. And so this was a horrifically bloody event, a terrible, terrible event for the nation of Israel. And on arriving in Jerusalem, that night, many Jews were, of course, slaughtered. He went into the temple. He took away the daily sacrifice. He set up an image and demanded every person to worship this image. And he slaughtered a pig. So he took an unclean animal. And just imagine, again, this is Israel. These are Zadok priests. These are holy people. These are people keeping and holding down the holy ways. They're doing their best amongst a nation that has let in the devil, let in these evil ways. Once they opened the door, the devil came in, and that was it. The flood started. Okay? And so he slaughtered a pig inside the temple, and the priests were forced by sword point to drink pig blood. I just want you to take this in, because this is the level of resolve that this spirit, this Antichrist spirit, has to desecrate that which is holy. So just don't think for a second that he will stop at anything to desecrate if you let this spirit in. And again, Daniel speaks about this. Now, we read, of course, we study and we find out that Antiochus sent Apollonius with 22,000 soldiers, this is recorded in many places, to pollute Jerusalem and the temple. And thus it is said that, of course, he fulfilled the prophecy of the arm shall stand on his part. And of course, in Daniel 11:32,
and such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries. But the people that do know their Elohim shall be strong and do exploits.
And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt with flatteries. But the people that know their Elohim shall do strong and be strong and do great exploits. Now the Jews became devastated, as you can imagine, by this massacre and abomination. So you can imagine Israel, all of Israel was just like, what happened? One holy priest, Maccabean, so that was his name, and he refused to blaspheme Yahuwah Elohim, and Antiochus Epiphanes killed him. Straight up. He refused to bow. He refused to capitulate. He refused to allow the Hellenization, the corruption of the holy worship, and that included many things, but not the least of which were appointed times. These were all things at odds with the then modern world. The then modern world was operating a little differently. The 5 sons of the Maccabean, led by Judas Maccabee, began to merge a guerrilla war, as many of you are familiar with, and on Antiochus, of course, and his armies, and of course, they were helped by supernaturally, miraculously. Other Jews started joining the Maccabean revolt, okay, the Maccabean family, and the revolt took place, and Antiochus Epiphanes and his armies were drawn out of Jerusalem. And when Judas Maccabean and his brothers came into the temple, they found oil, and they wanted to light, of course, the candles, and they lit it for one day, but it takes 8 days, of course, to make the holy oil, to have that oil, consecrated oil, to sanctify the oil. And so they prayed, and of course, you know the story of Hanukkah, the miraculous oil that lasted 8 days. And the reason why the Jews celebrate Hanukkah every year, of course, for 8 days. They don't celebrate any of the pagan holidays. They do celebrate Hanukkah, but what I would suggest to you is it's an incomplete story, because if all you ever heard about was the oil, if all you ever knew was the issue here was the oil, then, you know, if that's the only part of that story you ever hear about, then you're missing the most, probably, if not the most significant part of this. Now, here's some things we should, that everybody should know as we kind of continue this conversation. The new moon calendar, and here's the crux of the matter and why I'm bringing this to you. The new moon calendar was the official calendar of the Greeks. And when Alexander the Great conquered the Middle East in the 4th century BCE, the lunar calendar was introduced and gradually accepted by most of the people, by conquest, except for the Hebrew people. In 172 BCE, King Antiochus, so again, just this time period when he's ruling Jerusalem, he appoints Menelaus as Jerusalem's high priest. So he appoints somebody that is not supposed to be the high priest to introduce the Greek way of educating the young people and completely Hellenizing the Hebrew people. So that was his intention. He sent a senator from Athens to give the Hebrew people an ultimatum: to forsake the laws of Yahuwah Elohim and follow the king and his orders, or be put to death. So that was their choice. All right? And so most of the Hebrew people, of course, what did they do? They followed, they bowed their knee, just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were the 3 who didn't, but most of them did, because we know human beings, right? So most of the Hebrew people followed the king's orders and saved their families, tried to save their families, but many were put to death. Many of them were absolutely refused, and so King Antiochus forced the Hebrew people to celebrate what he called the birthday of the month. Every month, at the time of the moon's first visibility. Okay? So in 167 BCE, King Antiochus returned to Jerusalem after his second campaign in Egypt and immediately banned the Hebrew religion and the Enoch or Zadok calendar being kept at that time by the holy priests, and prohibited all normal or holy religious practices at that time. So this was really a huge moment. He dedicated the temple in Jerusalem to Zeus. I know, you're sitting there, maybe you didn't even know this. Some of you are going, when did this happen? This was about 200 years before Mashiach came. And he dedicated the temple to Zeus, the Lord of Heaven, as he calls it, which is another name for Baal Shemin, and ordered the Hebrew people to worship Zeus and to participate in the festival honoring Dionysus, who was Zeus's son, who was called Bacchus by the Romans. Okay, so this is all stuff that got woven into many things that people continue to keep without knowing. And many of you have woken up to pagan roots of different things, and you start digging them out. Well, here we go with another one this one's huge. The festival, of course, there were a lot of festivals and things that, were attributed to the Romans and to the pagans that got Hellenized or introduced and mixed in to what was supposed to be holy, right? Supposed to be a holy calendar. So what's happening in these last days is Yahuwah is raising up a remnant of people who have the same spirit of the holy Zadok priests, who are saying, I don't want to go with anything that Antiochus told me to do. When King Antiochus brings sacrifice of swine and makes abominable offerings in the temple, this begins the Maccabean revolt, okay? So we hear about that revolt. We understand how it went. We understand that they fought, and of course the Hanukkah story is often portrayed as a struggle for national liberation, but the Jewish revolt was also against a Greek Hellenization. In reality, it was much more complicated than just about one thing or another. The real conflict was not a physical but an intellectual or ideological one. Hanukkah was ultimately an ideological or spiritual war between paganism and the ancient ways, the holy ways, the Zadok holy priesthood that was holding fast, that little bit, that small group, that remnant were holding on. And of course they were slaughtered. It was a horrible thing. And we're thankful for the story of Hanukkah, but we still want to remember the blood of our brethren. It was not a struggle purely between Greeks and Jews. This was also between Jew and Jew. This was those Jews who wanted to Hellenize. There were those Jews that were sucked into the Greek culture. Okay, and it's no wonder why. I mean, the Greek culture was a major cultural milieu, and it was, basically the United States of the modern world of that time. And so we see a pattern in Jewish history, and it's not an unusual pattern. A world culture comes along and which enlightens and progressive and is changing the world, and some of the upper class Jews, they want to get in on that. In order for the anti-holy, antichrist king of Israel, the order of this king, Antiochus, was that you were to keep, listen to this now, the Babylonian 19-year moon calendar and abandon the Enoch calendar. I want you to get this, because he ordered it. The 19-year cycle, the one that they have to add, a month to every so often, the one you're told is like an ancient Hebrew. No, it was commanded by Antiochus Epiphanes. It was commanded by the man we all regard without question as clearly an antichrist figure, without question. An anti-Israel, anti-anointed, anti-holy figure, without question. And this order was given at the pain of death. This is the measure of this spirit's resolve to get you off the right time. And see, one thing he understood was that Israel, if there's one thing, that this was stuck in their craw. It was a big issue because Israel refused to keep time the same way. If you're keeping time according to the way that Enoch taught, and Jubilees confirms, which Jubilees was written during this time, warning about them going off, following the moon, following what he was telling them to do. And Jubilees warns about this. And the answer is very simple. The holy feast days are appointed holy times, and they are holy in heaven. And when you keep the wrong day and desecrate the holy day, you fulfill the ancient prophecy, and the work of the Antichrist is complete. Now the people of the covenant will not know the right days to hallow, and because they're marked with the edict of the Antiochus, so obeying Antiochus by let me conjunction or let me lunar or let me follow that method, right? They will hallow the wrong day. And the ancient prophecy is fulfilled. So today is the 12th day of the first month. And I want to keep emphasizing that to you, because that means in just 2 days, we reach the evening of Passover. And when we do, the next day is a holy Sabbath day. Okay? So I want to bring this to your knowledge, because I want you to understand this, okay? I share this with you in love, that you may consider well what you're going to do. Now, many will not hallow the holy day, and will desecrate it with unclean things, with commerce, and desecrate it as a day of testimony. A remnant who keep the ancient ways have heard the voice of the priest after the order of Melchizedek.
But the people that do know their Elohim shall be strong.
Okay, calling us to remember the reason for the war, the reason why our brethren died, the reason why they had to pray for oil, and miraculously it lasted 8 days. He's not just restoring the oil in this hour, which is a big thing that is being restored at this moment. It is his shemen, and he is restoring his shemen, his oil, to be restored to his remnant in this hour. But it is not just the oil that this represents, but also the proper keeping of time. And this is what the enemy came to do, to interrupt times and seasons. And so we remember why so many of our brethren died. And the calendar that was forsaken is remembered again in this time. And once again, a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, are holding fast to the holy things, even at pain of death, even if they hate us for it. For we serve the everlasting one. We serve the one who is after the order of Melchizedek, who abideth ever to make intercession for us. And so it is that we seek first his kingdom and the right way to go about the year, so that we do not hallow the wrong day, and that we sanctify the right day. Now, to listen to them, you would skip right past this week and be looking at another. What a terrible tragedy it would be if you missed the holy day.
For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons, and comes in from year to year, 10 days too soon. For this reason the years will come upon them, when they will disturb the order, and make an abominable day, the day of testimony, and an unclean day, a feast day. And they will confound all the days, the kadosh with the unclean, and the unclean day with the kadosh. For they will go wrong as to the months, and Sabbaths, and feasts, and jubilees. For this reason I command and testify to you, that you may testify to them. For after your death your children will disturb them, so that they will not make the year 364 days only. And for this reason they will go wrong as to the new months and seasons and Sabbaths and feasts, and they will eat all kinds of blood with all kinds of flesh.
Let me encourage you to review what I've shared with you, to do your own study, to check for yourself, to see if what I've told you is true. And if after you come back from your review of history, you realize that in fact an attack was made to get you away from the right rendering of time, won't you want to know what it was they were so afraid of? They didn't want you to find the windows of heaven, where he pours out a blessing so great, there shall not be room enough to receive it. Remember that these days that are coming up are appointed times. They are not the days of the Jews. They are not feasts of the Jewish people. They are the feasts of Yahuwah Elohim. They are established in heaven, and we call them to earth. As it is in heaven, so shall it be in earth. Amen. And so, saints, understand that when we pursue these things, we pursue them in love, to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. As for me and my house, we stand with the Maccabees. We stand with those who would not yield, who refuse to capitulate and allow the introduction of heathen ways. Instead, let us hold fast to that which was passed down, the ancient pathway given to us and confirmed in his word. Let us return to it, that we may hallow the right day and not desecrate it, that we may remember our King and his kingdom. May Yahuwah bless each and every one of you, and remember, Yahushua HaMashiach, he alone is King of Kings.